Welcome to Sing Smart. Because of the tough decisions which had to be made that canceled our spring concerts and are holding off the beginning of the Tampa Oratorio Singers 2020-2021 singing season, the board creatively challenged me to use this time to enhance the chorus's knowledge and understanding of the music that we perform. You do not really need to be completely musically literate to contribute and to enjoy singing, but the more that you understand, the more confidently you will contribute, and honestly, the more you will enjoy learning the learning process. I am hoping that these classes will help you to have a better understanding of the music. I will begin with the basic elements of music: rhythmic duration, pitch and melody, harmony and texture, dynamics, and Italian modifiers, form. These elements together create what makes a piece exciting, haunting, interesting, and dynamic. I have tried to organize these classes in a way that each session or class builds on the knowledge of the previous classes. Music theory builds on some of the basic musical understandings, and I want to make sure that everyone knows where we're coming from. It's sort of like long division. If you can't multiply and subtract, you cannot do long division, no matter how smart you are. Music theory builds. Let's begin. Each week I will tell you the material that will be covered in the next class so that you can do some reading in preparation from your text. Our text is this book, The Choral Singer's Handbook. It's by Roy C. Bennett. It's published by Mark's Music Company and distributed by Hal Leonard. You can get this book through Amazon, or you can get on the TOS website and see if they still have books available. There are also handouts that will be referred to in classes that should be printed or downloaded prior to our sessions. Please have them accessible during the sessions. You can look on the website for these as well. For today's class, you will need, number 1, speed markings, number 2, conducting patterns and accents, number 3, count singing exercises. Please feel free to contact me following our sessions with comments or questions. My email is right here on the board, callahan@palmacia.org. You must understand that we're filming 2 sessions at a time, so not only will I have on the same lovely outfits for the first 2 sessions, but I may not hear from you until after the next session. So give me a little time to get back to you, but I will be happy to answer questions if I can. Please begin your reading this week on page 54. I realize that you don't have time to do that right now, but it would be a good review of what we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. We begin our study with rhythm. Rhythm or pulse is the backbone or the heartbeat of a piece of music. It is the elapsed time from one tick of the clock up to, but not including, the next tick. A pulse or a beat is the regularly recurring underlying pulsation that compels music to progress through time. It creates motion. It compares to a physical essential rhythm or heartbeat. In 1815, a German inventor and engineer, Melzel, I'm not sure that's right, but that's as close as I can get today. Melzel perfected the metronome. It is a very useful tool. It contains an ingenious clock. I think this might have come from Melzel in 1815. That's not true, but I've had this since I can remember as a young child. I have to tell you that nowadays you can download a metronome on your iPhone or your Android. It's a free app. Every musician should have it. But I'm going to talk about this because this is how it looked when it was developed by Melzel. It contains this ingenious clockwork mechanism, which is fronted by this long weighted rod. Let me see if I can get this. The clockwork swings the rod at an even rate from side to side, making a steady clicking noise. The word tempo comes from the Latin word tempus, meaning time. The tempo can be varied by sliding the weight up and down. It's steady when it's even. I'm sorry, I'm not holding it straight. and up it can go slow. This can help you keep a steady heartbeat, a steady pulse in your music. To give you an idea and a central point of reference, if I set that, there are little numbers on there, if I set that to 60, there will be 60 ticks within a minute, which means that's 1 tick per second. Actually, if that's your quarter note value, that's pretty slow. What do you say? 1,100, 1,200? That's a slow quarter note beat. But that gives you some point of reference. It can go faster and it can go slower, but it stays steady for you. Beethoven was a friend of Mozart's and became one of the first to make extensive use of this device in his scores. Since that time, composers have had the ability to specify in their scores precisely how fast they want the music to be performed. Often, a note value will be placed by the number of beats per measure to further clarify the pulse. I just mean it's just as simple as this. Say quarter note equals 65. If you're in 4/4 time, then that quarter note would happen, that click would happen 4 times within a measure. It's just that simple, but it's very straightforward and very clear. Since that time, composers have used this and had the ability to be specific. And they have used this often. The pulse is always felt. It is always there. It is not always audibly heard through the music. It has to be felt within the musician's head. You will sometimes find an Italian word instead of a metronome marking at the very beginning of a score. That word also helps us with tempo. We call these speed markings. If you will pull out handout number 1, I have compiled a very brief list of some of these for you. They are the Italian speed markings. There are many, many words used to assist a performer to create the correct tempo. But I have gathered a brief list of the most commonly used. You will find these in your glossary in the back of our book, but they're alphabetically along with every other term that you need to understand. I wanted you to see some of the most common ones, and I have listed them from slow to fast. You can read these just like I can. I'll read them to you, but you need to take these into your brain so that when you see this on a score, it gives you some idea of the concept that the composer is looking for. Largo, slow and stately. Adagio is also slow, but not quite as slow as largo. Andante, I think of a walking pace, kind of medium. Moderato is at a moderate speed. That's pretty easy. Allegretto is fairly quick and allegro is quick. Vivace, lively, quick. Pretty fast, I would say, when I see vivace. And presto, go for it, baby. It's really fast. Memorize those. Have them in your head. Keep the sheet close by. I'm going to move on to meter. Meter is the ratio which indicates how note values are assigned to represent the pulse in a piece of music. The meter is indicated by a time signature. A time signature is made up of 2 numbers. They are one over the other, placed at the beginning of a composition. They are never written as fractions, but I have to confess, I have a little cheat that will help you to this. It breaks the no fraction rule, but it is a helpful tool. I'll show you in just a minute. The upper number indicates how many pulses are grouped together in a measure. Say this is a time signature. There are two pulses per measure in this. There are 4 pulses per measure in this time signature. Where I cheat is I put a 1 over the 4, and that becomes a quarter or a fourth. That means a quarter note gets 1 beat. If I put a 1 over this 2, then it's a half. That means a half note gets a beat. If there's an 8, it could easily be, say, 3/8. 3 pulses per measure, and an 8th note is getting 1 beat. You're not supposed to use that fraction idea, but I'll tell you the fraction idea helps you to understand which note is receiving the pulse in the measure. So I think it's worth a little bit of a cheat on that. On page 55, your book describes bar lines as vertical lines that enclose the group of beats. The music between the bar lines is called a bar or a measure. In rehearsals, I will often refer to a measure number so that we can easily find a specific spot in the music. The general rule is that every bar must have the correct number of beats in it, right? It has to go according to the time signature. There is an exception. The exception of the first and last bars. If a piece begins on the anacrusis or an upbeat, then the first bar will not contain a full complement of beats. You must then figure out which beat of the bar that you're beginning on. But the first and last bars of a piece must add up to a complete measure. This means that if a piece does begin on an anacrusis or an upbeat, the value of that has to be subtracted off the last bar of the piece. Example. This is an easy example. I'm going to have an upbeat. We're going to sing, "O Come All Ye Faithful." It's 4/4 time signature. So it's 1, 2, 3, "O come." That O is beat 4. It's the only beat in that measure. At the end of the refrain of "O Come All Ye Faithful," it ends, "Christ the Lord." The word Lord, the measure that Lord begins on, which is a downbeat, 1, 2, 3, off. There's no rest. There's no fourth beat in that. A note to choral singers. When you're asked to number the measures in your score, realize that if there is a partial first measure at the beginning of a movement, it is not counted as a measure. If the final measure of the piece, which then completes that first measure, is numbered. If you don't know this little trick, you'll end up one measure off at every reference point. So please remember that. In early notation, time signatures were often expressed with symbols rather than as numbers. Most of these symbols have disappeared, but two important ones have survived. Common time, C, which means the same thing as 4/4. Although the symbol looks like the letter C, contrary to popular belief, and I have told people incorrectly for as many years as I've been a musician probably, common time is, common time, it stands for common time, but it refers to the broken circle. Triple time was considered the perfect rhythm, and common time was the broken circle. Now listen to this. Triple time, which was represented by a complete circle, was considered perfect because of the importance of the number 3 in medieval times, and it links to the Trinity, to the Holy Trinity. I certainly didn't know that. That's the one thing I learned on this class. No, I learned more. The other term that survived through time is alla breve. The symbol is 2/2, or cut time, or cut common time. And this is what that looks like. This can be called alla breve, it can be called cut time, it can be called cut common time. And what it does, it cuts it in half. It's 2/2 time, 2 beats per measure, and there again my little fake trip, the half note gets 1 beat, which leans more into the downbeat strong and the second beat not quite as strong. Time signatures can and often do change in the middle of a piece. Often you need to identify what relationship the composer intends between the old and the new tempo. Composers or editors will generally indicate something like quarter note equals eighth note. So if the time signature changes here, say right here, if we're in 4/4 and we're going to go to 6/8, the composer might say that we're pulsating in quarter notes here, right? But for a quarter note in this, Gloria can't draw, equals an eighth note in this, or say a dotted eighth, which would make more sense in 6/8 time. So you have to identify that and absorb that as you're reading music. Conducting patterns. Singers also need to know and understand conducting patterns. Each conducting pattern creates a visual of a time signature and a tempo. If you can look at handout number 2, I wrote the basic conducting patterns out for you. I do need to tell you right off the bat, before I tell you you have to learn these, that when you watch a conductor do the conducting patterns, you're seeing them backwards. You're seeing them backwards. You know, it's easy for me to sit up here and say, there's 2, but your 2 is over there for me. So just keep that in mind. The first beat of every bar is called a downbeat because the conductor's arm should, in theory, make some kind of downward movement. Depending on the style of the music, the beat itself will usually be indicated by a little flick of the fingers or the wrist, or the whole hand even. But that's where the downbeat comes. It follows then that the last beat of each bar must be an upbeat. You must go up before you can come down. The conductor's upbeat at the start of a piece or section that begins on a downbeat of the opening of measure should tell you all that you need to know about the speed and the mood of what you're about to sing. So if it's a gentle piece, the conductor will go up, down. If it's kind of a forceful thing, boom, you'll get a little bit more. Fist probably is not a good thing. If the conductor brings it down to the core of their body, it usually means a very full sound. If it wants legato, it'll be a smoother, more graceful upbeat. What that tells me is that you should be watching the conductor for these upbeats so you know where the downbeat is and so that you know what kind of mood you should be singing on that very first pitch. I also think that you should be able to conduct these. I think every singer should be able to conduct these few motions. And they're not that difficult. The most important thing I need to tell you to do is look at the time signature before you think about it, because each one's different. They're so easy. 1, 2, 1, 2. 3 is 1, 2, 3, with the downbeat always down and the upbeat that comes just before the downbeat always up. 4 would be 1, 2, 3, 4. When you get into more complex rhythms like 5/4 rhythms, they generally fall. You can conduct in 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, but they usually fall in a grouping of 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. So you'll see a conductor do sort of a heavy 1 on the first grouping and then kind of a less heavy 1 on the second grouping. That's a little more complicated than I expect you to do. But you will see 5/4 measures that end up with 2 plus 3 or 3 plus 2. The next section I'm going to talk about includes some counting hints. And because you have that sheet in your hand, I'm deciding to move on to that sheet where it talks about accents. Accents are explained on page 60 of your text, and I quote, "Implicit in the time signature is the way the beats within the bar are to be accented." Composers use these symbols when they want to give a special note an accent. Sometimes you'll see an accent like this. Sometimes you'll see an up and down kind of accent. But these are usually in the middle of a measure at an unexpected place, creating a syncopation or some kind of text accent that they're looking for. But even if there are no written accent marks in a bar, there are certain accent values inherent to each beat. For example, the first beat in every bar will normally get the heaviest accent in the bar. How many times have I asked you to crescendo a tie over the bar line? Go to beat 1, lean on beat 1, dance with me, keep beat 1 happening. I have to tell you a sad thing and a good thing. I teach piano, and when a child comes in and plays Mary Had a Little Lamb, and it's what is wrong? The notes are right, the rhythm's basically right, but there's no pulse. Where is beat 1? 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. It's in 4. Sorry, I said that wrong. 1, 2. If they play like this, it tells me a whole different story. The other thing I'll do sometimes to people is to ask you, how many beats am I putting in a measure? I hope you hear 2. How many beats in this measure? It should be 4, yes. If it's it should be 3. How do you know? I'm playing the same note. They're all quarter notes. How can you tell? You don't realize it, but it's just like when you speak, you accent a syllable in a word, you're accenting the downbeat of every measure in that. And that's what the underlying pulse that is always unwritten, but there, you should see. I'm gonna ask you to look at the handout on the word under accents. It shows you the 2 accents that I've shown you, but if you keep going down, it demonstrates that they have markings that are kind of universal, I would say. The heaviest, if you're marking your score, the heaviest and the thickest would be on beat 1 of every single measure. The light line, which I made my heavier line heavier because they were too close to not to be able to tell. But the light line would be in the middle of 4 beats. Go down to figure 45, where it's 4/4, the meter is 4/4. The strongest beat is on 1, a very light beat on beat 2, a semi-strong beat on beat 3, and a very light beat on beat 4. It's just that simple. If it's 2/2, it's strong, weak. If it's 3/2, it's strong, weak, weak. And that should go without conversation. You should know that. We're going to get into compound time. I guess I can go ahead and tell you about this. Pulses that divide into groups of 3 are called compound time. If you look over at the right side of your handout, you see a 6/8 measure. 6 beats in a measure, and an 8th note gets 1 beat. Yes, if it's a slow tempo, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Even within that, you're feeling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means that you are subdividing the measure into 2. But the pulse, you're dividing into triplets. So that is called compound time when it's divided into triples instead of duples. And because the overall measure in 6/8 time there shows that it's in 2 main pulses, it would be compound because of the triplet, the 1, 2, 3, and it would be duple because it's really still 2 beats per measure. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and would probably be conducted that way to keep the pulse falling forward. 9/8 would then fall into a compound triple time because you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 if it's a very slow tempo. Usually you won't, even in a slow tempo, think that way. You'll think of triples and 3 beats in the measure. So triple, 3 times 3 would be the 9. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be compound triple time. So you need to understand the difference in that. I hope that's helpful. You can read this. This accent page is in your score, in your book, I believe. And so refer to your text. But most of the information's here. But it's just that simple. Downbeat on 1, always. The strongest beat of the measure. Unless it's the end of a phrase or something unusual. Study that. Good. Let's move on. There are a couple other things I would like to just tell you about rhythm. We have all taken a look at a score that has gazillions of notes. I'm going to show you this. just because I was a high school student when my teacher handed this piece to me and asked me to learn it. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's a lot of ink on this page, right? And it frightened me to death. I thought, oh, I can't play that fast. The truth is the pulse in this, the pulse is in 8 notes. It's in 6/8 time. So even at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is a very slow movement of a Bach Italian concerto. But it's frightening to look at. Don't let the page frighten you, okay? Just don't go there. Where do we go next? I've talked about triplets. Another term that you must understand is that of a tie. On page 58 of your text, and I quote, ties, these little curves that go above or below notes, it has to go to the same note, however. If it's like that, it looks like a little smiley face. If you're up here, oops, that was backwards. It looks like a little frowny face. Has to go to the same letter name note. And what it does, it indicates that the notes that they connect are to be sounded as one note with the total value of all. It has to connect like pitches. We've talked about accents. You know, I have one more little idea I can share about compound and duple time for you. And here it is. It's so simple. I can teach this to my children. Think about this. Simple time divides into ands, into twos. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Think about this. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. You're in triples. Triplet, 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 mouse. So that's the difference in simple time and compound. I just had to tell you that because I like that. Dotted notes. Dotted notes really created shorthand for composers. Dotted notes can be written like this. This is originally what you would see. Here's your tie connecting a quarter note to an eighth note, which would give you 1.5 beats, right? And you would hold it out because you talked about a tie, you understand that. They made this a little shorthand. When a dot is beside a note, you add half the value of that note to that complete note, to the dotted note. So the quarter note, say we're in 4/4, the quarter note gets 1 beat, the dot gets a half a beat, together they get 1.5 beats. This is a whole lot easier to write than this when you're writing many of them. So it really was invented as a little shorthand for composers. They didn't have computers and ways to do it like we do. Something that we've had, it happens in the Messiah. Double dotted notes. Most people are not sure exactly what to do with that, but the truth is, this is the longhand version. We're still in 4/4, quarter note gets 1. You add half the value of the note with the first dot. You add a quarter of the value of the note with the second dot. So you've got 1 beat. That dot represents a half a beat. This dot represents a quarter of a beat. And together, they represent 1 3/4 of a beat. That would generally be followed by another 16th note to finish that pulse, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay. Oh, here we go. I have a little exercise I want you to try. Everyone in the room has to try this, okay? I've written it up on the board because it's not hard, but it goes back to just keeping your pulse going, and you see a little bit about rhythm here. We're going to pretend like we're in 4/4 time. We're going to do 2 measures for each one of these, okay? 2 measures, 2 measures, 2 measures. Your left hand is going to be your metronome. Let's back up and do a little exercise. We need to move. Your left hand, decide on your pulse. It can be slow. And then we're going to do whole, 2, 3, 4. Whole, 2. Then we're going to do 2 halves in a measure. 1, 2, 3. 2 measures of that. Then we're going to do quarters. 1 more measure of that. Then we're going to do 2/8 with your right hand. That's one measure. 2, 2, 3. Now change to triplets. Triple. One more measure of that. 4/16 notes. Y'all are pretty good, okay? That was easy. Now here's the test. This is just to wake you up a little bit, because music theory can be a little on the dry side. If you haven't figured that out by now, it is. That's okay. You need to understand this. So we're going to take the metronome away so you can feel this pulse in your being, okay? Now, we've got a couple people here to help me with this. So here is a test, because we're going to do this without the metronome. So your left hand is still. Here is our pulse. 1, 2, 3, go. Y'all are good. Well, keep practicing that. But the key is to make sure that your pulse stays steady and you're internalizing that pulse, and you can change rhythm patterns. Very good. The little group here is excellent. Now I'm moving you into count singing. This is handout number 3. I have to tell you that I got some of these ideas and these exercises from a book called From the Downbeat. It's a conductor's book more than anything, but it's an important concept that we need to learn. We're going to learn to count sing, whether you like it or not. Here's some reasons. Listen to this. Count singing will greatly increase your rhythmic accuracy. You will actually, I skipped something I want to go back to, but we'll do that in a minute. Count singing will greatly increase your rhythmic accuracy. You will actually see and hear how each note fits in. When it starts, how long it stays, and when it stops. You will begin to appreciate that there is an exact place for even the shortest note. Rhythmic integrity is vitally important to good choral singing. Count singing definitely improves intonation. If you're having difficulty with pitches, with a long note passage, let me try that again. When talking about intonation, if you're having difficulty with a long note that extends over several measures, and it begins to sag in pitch, if you do count singing like in 8th notes or 16ths, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, you lose your breath support because you don't have to think about it. You're on the note, you're just kind of staggering through that. If you count sing through that, it will help your intonation. Count singing will greatly enhance your sight reading. We're going to get into that as well. You will see it's a good thing to learn. As a piano teacher, I often tell students when they get into a certain point, let's count the rhythm in this phrase before you even start to play the phrase, before you even look at the hand position or the key signature. You don't need any pitch, you don't need anything. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, and find out where the difficult rhythmic things are. If you can have the rhythm in your head before you begin, it will help your accuracy playing the notes because you don't have to think about the rhythm. You've already had it. You've heard it 3 times in your brain. Your brain will follow that much more easily, and you can focus on the pitches. That's true in singing too. A legato smooth line can be enhanced by count singing. The constancy of the energized sound that naturally connects notes and continues until a rest or a breath is indicated. The feeling of the forward motion, the line, can be enhanced by count singing in a legato or a smooth way. You can learn difficult and melismatic passages more quickly if you count sing them first. I have to tell you that after hearing assessments, I heard runs from the Bach B minor runs from the Bach Magnificat and runs from Handel's Messiah. And I was a little bit frightened by individual difficulty in keeping the rhythm alive and singing correct pitches. It's not easy to do, but if we get the rhythm down first, and then we can practice in a slower rhythm and increase the tempo, it will help our reading of these melismatic passages. I think it's a great thing. It can also help our diction. If I say put the T on the and of 3, you will know exactly where the and of 3 is, and you'll know exactly where to articulate that T. So let's get on with it. Please pull out your handout. Here we go. Let me find mine. To count sing, you simply sing the appropriate number of the beat with the appropriate note. You substitute the numbers of beats per measure in place of the text. Are you ready for that? Maybe I should back up. I think I skipped this, and I think this is important. So I want to pull back and get this for you before I start actually count singing. Oh, yes. Oh, my dear. Here we go. You need to know these note values before you can count sing. So let's back up. So forgive me if I'm not following your book's pattern on this, but I believe in this pyramid. This is called a whole note. I'm going to talk in the measure of 4/4 time. A whole note gets 4 beats. 2 halves equal a whole, correct? 4 quarters equal a whole. 2 quarters equal a half. Then you get into the eighth notes. Eighth notes can be drawn connected or separated, or even in groups of 4. But 2 eighth notes equal a quarter. 4 eighth notes equal a half. 8 eighth notes equal the whole. Do you see? It's just building a pyramid. When we get down here, we're in 16th notes. You see you have the double line above or the double flag. Do you see this? All the way through that. Those are 16th notes. You count 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. I also teach huckleberry, but 1E and a for count singing is what you need to know. So we're going to do this. You also need to just simply memorize these. A whole rest. This is for a whole measure. It can be a 4/4 measure. It can be an 8/4 measure. It's for an entire measure. If the entire measure is a 4/4, then it's for that. A half of a gentleman doesn't tip his hat. It's sort of like a gentleman tipping his hat. He's a complete gentleman, the complete measure. A half a gentleman is kind of a jerk. He keeps his little baseball cap on in the room. He's a half guy. That's a half rest. A quarter rest looks like a bird flying sideways. There are better drawings of that, but that's what I think about. An eighth rest, I think, goes with the eighth note in that it has the one little dot and as part of its flag. It equals the same as this eighth note. A 16th rest has the 2, just like it coordinates with the 2 lines over here. I hate to tell you this, but you just need to memorize this. If you don't know this by now, take a picture of this pyramid and learn it. I also want to go back to the triples a little bit when we're talking about these note rhythms, because this is something that is important to note. Triple quarter notes, your book explains that triple quarter notes equal the same as 2 quarter notes. That's true. My thought process has always been that triple quarter notes, or any triplet, equals the value of the next higher note. These are quarter note triplets, so 3 quarter note triplets equals a half note. They also do equal this. My thought process just goes to the half note because to me that's easier when you're counting in rhythm. If you'll notice, when you have triple quarter notes, there's a bracket around them like this, a little square bracket with the 3 indicating the triple. And when you have eighth note triplets, it has this little curve usually, and sometimes they even omit the curve, but you have this tiny little 3. The 3 eighth notes equals the next higher value, is the same amount of time as the quarter note. It also, in your book, indicates that these 3 equal the same amount of time as the 2 eighth notes, which is correct. It's just a different way of thinking about it. Think about it any way you want to, but you need to know that. I'm going into count singing. Let's go. The first thing you have to do in count singing is look at your time signature. The first exercise is in 3/4 time. I want you to realize that this is My Country 'Tis of Thee. It will be easy to sing this, and it will also be almost too easy to sing the 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. But do it with me if you can. Ready and go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1, 2 and 3 and... That was almost too easy, except for the fact that I didn't have enough breath support to get all the way through the phrase. So, and that didn't give me a chance to breathe. The second example you will notice is there's a term called rhythmicized, or the rests are written into the score where you should take a breath. And this one has the rest indicated. I want the singers to breathe exactly how much time that the rest indicates. And in those places, omit the appropriate number. So if there is a rest indicated, there is no sound to be made, but your breathing happens during that rest. Also notice that there are two versions. There's a first and second ending on rhythm exercise 2. The first one has a half note in the first ending, and it gives you a quarter note of breath. And then you repeat. You should already know this, but when you get down to that first ending, you jump over to the second ending. When you get to the second ending, the last note of a piece, it's a half note dot, or dotted half note, as you would call it. The second version assumes that you're at the end of the piece, and in this case, it's not necessary to count out the last 1 and 2 and 3, but just hold the 1 until you're cut off. Okay? So let's see if we can do this. Same, we'll sing. We're not up to pitch, but that's okay. It really doesn't matter. This is where singers have it easier. We can start wherever we want to. Ready? And go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. Caught you 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. Very good. So you're improving already. The third example is the first two phrases of It Came Upon a Midnight Clear. It's a good example of a familiar tune in 6/8. I'm going to conduct it this time in 6. Oh, I can't sing that high. I can't sing anyway, as most of you know. So maybe I'll play and you count. But we're in 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all. But you did very well. Practice this. If this is difficult for you, spend the time this week working on some of these. I'm going to move on. The fourth example is the same tune, but it should be conducted in 2. This is where we have compound duple time, and I would conduct this. It came upon a midnight clear. Okay, so let's try to do this. Each beat is now divided by 3. I tend to put a duh on the third. 1 and duh, 2 and duh. It's up to you. You're going to hear me do that. So this is one of those places that you also have the upbeat. We're not at the end of the piece, so you won't find the end of this measure. But this measure begins with 1/8 note. And so this is called the upbeat. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Da 1 and da 2. Da 1 and da 2 and da 1 and da 2. Da 1 and da 2 and da 1 and da 2. Da 1 and da 2 and da 1 and da 2. And then it goes on. So you're getting better. You have to understand that if you're dividing into 3, 1 and 2. Okay, the fifth example is the first 11 bars of Joy to the World. Now this gives us an opportunity to divide by 4. Or you have the 16th notes in this. So it's 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and... So I don't know what... We'll start there. I'm only an octave lower. It doesn't matter. 1, 2, ready, go. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2 and a 1E and a... 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2. 1E and a 2E and 1E and a 2 and a 1E and a 2. We're done. Okay, that was 11 bars. But you've got to watch the rest. Watch the rest as you go through this. Now here we go. It's going to get more complicated on the next one. You have to use your brain a little bit more. We've been counting every rhythmic note. As a piece gets faster, sometimes 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2 is a little bit awkward to try to do. But you do have some beats that have to have that counted that way. So it's permissible to go back to the 1 and 2E and a 1 and, but you have to discern when you're singing 8th notes or 1 and, or when you're going into the 16th note pattern and have to shift to the 1E and a or 2E and a. So let's do this slowly and see if you can do it. 1, 2, ready, and 1 and 2E and a 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 1E and a 2. 1 and 2 and 1E and a 2. Do you understand that you have to be able to shift from one to the next and know when to do that? So that is getting a little bit more challenging, but do you see how it helps? Rhythm number 7 is measures 5 to 10 of a Messiah chorus, and He Shall Purify. Notice it's in the bass clef, and there's nothing on beat 1 or beat the part of beat 2. So it's 4/4 time, 1 and 2, and so you're going to have to but you're going to have to think 1 and 2, and come in on the and of 3. There's your pitch. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2 and 3 and... Good. Try that one again. It's a little harder. Ready? Try it again. Same thing. I'll conduct 1 and 2. And 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E, 2E and a 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2 and 3 and... Good. Now what I want want you to do this week is to open an old score. Open an old score of some piece that we've sung as a chorus. And just try to do some of this sight singing. The count singing. I don't care about the pitches so much as you're doing this, but I want you to learn to do some of this count singing on your own. As we move forward with sight singing, it's an integral part of making your sight singing work. And so you have to practice. I can't teach you this in a class. I can't teach you this in a month. It's something you have to do and you have to commit to. I'm convinced that we will be a better chorus if we learn this skill, and each one of you needs to be a part of that team. Let's talk about next week's class. It will focus on notation, grand staffs, clefs, note recognition, whole and half steps, accidentals, temperament, circles of fifth, key signatures, major key signatures next week. Please prepare for next week's class by reading from your text beginning on page 65. Bring the following handouts next week. Number 4 is notes on the staff and the piano. Number 5 is the circle of fifths. Number 6 is a chart of major key signatures. And I'm asking you to bring your textbook next week. I do have a 7th handout that's like 3 or 4 pages. But what I'm going to do from that handout is in your textbook. It would be easier just to bring your textbook than to print all that. I miss the music. I miss you guys. Have a great week. Study. Bye.